Zara Simmons had no intention of sharing her booth until a stranger in a drenched suit asked if he could sit across from her, and she said yes before realizing he had the kind of jawline that usually lived on magazine covers. The diner was packed, loud with forks scraping plates and the hiss of the overworked espresso machine. Outside, New York was being slammed by an unexpected downpour, and inside, every seat was taken. Zara had been curled in her corner, her laptop open, editing wedding photos for a client she couldn't afford to lose. She barely looked up when the bell above the door jingled. But then a deep voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me. Mind if I join you? I'm stranded." She glanced up and her fingers froze over her keyboard. He was tall, soaked, dark brown hair dripping onto the collar of a tailored coat. And even through the wet, his presence was commanding, like he didn't belong in a chaotic 24-hour diner on a Tuesday night, but at some exclusive rooftop bar with a city view and a dress code. Zara blinked. Yeah, sure. Sit. Thanks, he muttered, sliding into the seat across from her. He ran a hand through his wet hair and laughed under his breath. Note to self: never trust a Manhattan car service during a thunderstorm. She gave a tight smile, eyes drifting back to her screen. But curiosity tugged at her. No umbrella? Lost it in the wind. It took off like a bird. I didn't even chase it. Just watched it go. Her lips twitched. Sounds about right. He looked at her for a second, then smiled. I'm Quentin Tate. She nodded. Zara Simmons. They shook hands over coffee cups, and if she noticed his fingers were warm despite the storm, she didn't mention it. Laptop, camera bag, 3 empty coffee cups. You a writer or a spy? Photographer, she said. Weddings mostly. Sometimes dogs and costumes if I'm desperate. He laughed. That's a niche. It pays the rent. She sipped her coffee, eyes narrowing. And you? What's your story, Quentin with no umbrella? He hesitated just long enough for it to be noticeable. Corporate. Boring stuff. Management consulting. She raised an eyebrow. You just made that sound way more suspicious than if you'd said you worked for the FBI. He smiled again, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Trust me. The truth's far less exciting. The waitress dropped 2 menus on the table, eyeing Quentin's soaked coat with amusement. You want coffee, handsome? Please. And maybe the biggest burger you've got. Zara leaned back, watching as he shrugged off his coat. Underneath, his dress shirt clung to him, and she caught a glimpse of a watch that looked not cheap. Definitely not something from the mall. She frowned slightly. Something about him didn't add up. You from around here? She asked, trying to sound casual. Not exactly. I was on my way to a meeting downtown. Car broke down. Phone's dead. And this diner was the only thing nearby with lights still on. You're having a rough night. He gave a dry laugh. You could say that. They ate, talked, and somehow, an hour passed without her noticing. He asked about her photography, really asked like he cared. When she described her last wedding shoot, he leaned in, elbows on the table, totally engaged. And when she asked about his consulting, he dodged again, but gently. I'll tell you one day, he said, voice low, when I don't look like a drowned rat. She laughed. Deal. The storm outside didn't let up. The diner emptied out slowly. It was nearly midnight when Zara finally gathered her things. I should go, she said, standing. Quentin stood too. Let me walk you. In that. She nodded toward the rain. He grinned. What's a little more water? They stepped outside and the rain hit them like a wall. Quentin held his coat over her head as they ran half a block to the train station, both breathless and soaked by the time they ducked under the awning. She was laughing, clutching her bag to her chest. You're insane. You said that like it's a bad thing. She turned to him, suddenly aware of how close they were. His eyes were dark, intense, searching hers. Thank you, she said, a little quieter now. For the company. And the coat. And the burger wreck. You made a rainy night a lot better, Zara. And then, before she could say anything else, he stepped back. Good night. She watched him walk away, no umbrella, no phone, just a mysterious guy who'd somehow made her forget the stress of rent, deadlines, and dog costumes for 2 whole hours. She didn't expect to see him again. 3 days later, she was in her tiny studio apartment editing photos when the doorbell rang. She padded barefoot to the door, opened it, and froze. Quentin stood there, dry this time, in a tailored charcoal coat, holding a white box and a coffee cup tray. She stared at him like he'd materialized from a daydream. "I owed you a coffee," he said, grinning. "And a proper introduction." She stepped aside wordlessly, letting him in. "Quentin Tate," he said, holding out his hand again. "CEO of Tate Global." She blinked. "Wait. What?" He chuckled. "I wasn't lying, technically. I do manage things. Just a lot of things." She stared. "You're the Quentin Tate? The guy on the Forbes list?" He raised an eyebrow. "You Googled me?" I mean, yes, but only because something about you felt off." He handed her the coffee. "You caught me on a rare off day." She took the cup, dazed. "Why are you here?" "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night." He met her eyes, serious now. "And because I'd like to take you to dinner. A real one. Somewhere that doesn't serve food on paper plates." She looked at him for a long moment, and then she smiled. "You're still weird," she said. He grinned. "But charming." She rolled her eyes. "A little." He held up the white box. "Also, I brought cake." She stepped closer, heart racing just a little. "All right, Mr. CEO. Let's see if you're as good at dinner as you are at sharing booths." The restaurant was quiet in the way only truly expensive places could be, a hush that came not from silence, but from the absence of anxiety. No clatter, no cheap laughter, just the soft hum of a string quartet in the corner and the faint clinking of crystal glasses. Zara had never seen anything like it. She stood just inside the grand archway, wrapped in a long black coat Quentin had sent over with a note that simply said, "Wear this. I'll take care of the rest." And he had. A car arrived at her apartment at 6 sharp. A driver in a gray suit held the door open without a word. Inside the vehicle, there'd been a cream envelope with her name written in gold ink. The card inside? Blank, except for a pressed white orchid. Now she clutched her clutch like a lifeline, trying not to gape at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River or the chandelier that looked like it belonged in a royal ballroom. Quentin was already waiting at the table. He stood when he saw her, dressed in a sharply cut navy suit that made him look even taller than she remembered. His tie was dark, understated, the kind of thing that whispered wealth instead of shouting it. "You clean up all right," she said as she approached, trying to keep her voice light even as her pulse quickened. He took her coat without a word, handed it to a nearby hostess, then pulled out her chair. Once she sat, he returned to his seat and smiled, not the casual grin she'd seen in the diner, but something more deliberate. "I was starting to think you'd say no. I was tempted. This place looked like it might charge me for breathing too loudly. Don't worry. I prepaid for all your oxygen." She laughed, but her gaze drifted to the wine glasses, the polished silverware, the fresh calla lilies in the centerpiece. "This is a bit much. That's kind of the point." "Why?" He hesitated, then leaned forward. "Because I've spent years in rooms like this with people who never asked me anything real. And the other night you did. Over greasy coffee and a cracked table. I liked that." Zara tilted her head. "So this is what? A thank you dinner for being honest?" "No. This is a warning." She froze. "A warning? I don't date. Not in any traditional sense. My life's complicated. Constant travel, endless meetings, too many people pretending to like me because of my last name. It's messy. And you think that's supposed to scare me off?" His mouth curved slightly. "I think it should." Zara picked up her menu, eyes scanning words she barely understood. "Well, I've shot 3 weddings where the grooms got caught cheating before the cake was cut. You're going to have to try harder if you want to scare me." He studied her for a moment, then signaled the waiter with a flick of his fingers. 2 chef's tastings. No shellfish. A bottle of the 98 Margot. The server nodded and disappeared without writing anything down. Zara blinked. "You just ordered without asking me. You told me to impress you. I never said that. You didn't have to." She narrowed her eyes, but couldn't help the small smile tugging at her lips. You're infuriating. Most powerful men are. You think you're powerful? I know I am. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. So why are you here with someone who edits dog photos to make rent? Because you're not impressed by me. That's not true. I'm very impressed by your ability to talk about yourself in the third person. He laughed, the sound genuine and low. Fair. The first course arrived in silence. Something small and artfully arranged caviar on a violet-tinted mousse. Zara poked at it with her fork, then glanced up. So Quentin Tate, CO, mysterious, likes rainy diners and over-the-top dinners. What else? He considered her. I play piano. Poorly. I hate small talk. And I haven't spoken to my father in 7 years. That last part hung in the air longer than the rest. She didn't press. Instead, she said, I eat canned soup 3 nights a week. I used to want to shoot fashion campaigns, but I couldn't afford to intern for free long enough to get in. And I haven't been on a real date since my ex decided he needed to find himself in Costa Rica. He didn't flinch. Did he? No idea. He blocked me before I could ask. Another course came. Then another. Wine flowed, laughter bubbled in fits and starts. And somewhere between the truffle risotto and the lavender creme brulee, something shifted. Zara leaned in, elbows on the table, voice quieter now. Why didn't you just tell me who you were that night? Because I wanted to be a person, not a brand. She nodded slowly. And now? Now I want you to see both. The man and the madness. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded photo. She frowned as he handed it to her. It was a picture of her, one she clearly hadn't posed for. She was standing in the rain, half laughing, holding her camera protectively under her coat. The streetlights behind her made her hair glow. She looked alive. Quentin's voice was quiet. I had someone from my team find you. I knew your first name and that you were a photographer. It took 24 hours. Zara looked up sharply. You had me followed? No. I had you found. There's a difference. And you thought this was romantic? I thought it was necessary. I wasn't going to let you disappear. She held the picture tightly. You don't even know me. I want to. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of his words settling between them like a challenge. Finally, she stood. Walk me out. He rose immediately, offering his arm. She didn't take it, but she didn't walk away either. Outside, the night was crisp. The city was quieter here, tucked between 2 rivers and too far from the honking horns of Midtown. Zara stopped at the curb. I don't like being hunted down. I know, he said, but I'm not sorry. She turned to face him. I don't need a billionaire to save me. I'm not trying to save you. Then what are you trying to do? He met her gaze, calm and certain. I'm trying to find the one person in this city who makes me forget how exhausting it is to be me. She didn't say anything. Not when the car pulled up. Not when he opened the door for her. Not even when he slipped something into her hand before she stepped inside. Only once the car was gliding away did she look down. It was another card. This one had 4 words scribbled in sharp black ink. Next time, your world. Zara's world didn't come with string quartets or handwritten notes. It came with uneven sidewalks, cracked camera lenses, and a neighborhood that smelled like roasted peanuts and hot asphalt by noon. So when Quentin showed up at her Saturday morning shoot exactly where she told him to meet her, at the corner of Orchard and Delancey, she half expected him to be wearing something ridiculous, like suede loafers or a coat that cost more than her rent. Instead, he wore sneakers, black jeans, a plain charcoal t-shirt that fit him absurdly well. No entourage, no driver, just a coffee in one hand and a quiet, almost unreadable expression. You're early, she said, pulling her hair into a rough ponytail as she checked her bag for extra batteries. You said 10. It's 9:58. Punctuality doesn't count if you're that smug about it. He offered her the second coffee without a word. She took it, suspicious. Still trying to impress me? No, he said. I'm trying to not get in your way. Zara narrowed her eyes at him, then jerked her chin toward the building behind her. Come on, you can carry the light stand. Up 3 flights of stairs, through a hallway that smelled like old paint and incense, and into the small apartment of her client, a newly engaged couple who wanted candid shots that felt like us. Zara directed them with ease, moving furniture, adjusting curtains, making jokes that got real laughter instead of awkward smiles. Quentin stayed silent, observing, carrying things when she pointed, holding reflectors without asking questions, and occasionally catching her eye with a look that was more thoughtful than admiring. When they finished, she packed quickly, thanked the couple, and led him back down the stairs. You didn't say a word, she said once they were outside. You didn't need me to. Most guys I've dated would have tried to take over. I'm not most guys. She glanced at him sideways. No kidding. They walked for a few blocks in easy silence before she stopped at a crosswalk and turned to face him. All right, your turn. For what? You said next time it'd be my world. Well, you've seen it. Now I want to see something real from you. Not a restaurant. Not a car. Just you. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Follow me. They took the train uptown. A local line. No one recognized him, or if they did, they didn't care. Zara watched him as they stood shoulder to shoulder, swaying with emotion. He kept one hand braced above her, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth of his skin. They emerged near Riverside Park. He led her down a quiet path until they reached a wrought iron gate tucked between 2 stone pillars. He punched in a code and the gate clicked open. Beyond it was a small private garden. Untamed but beautiful. Wild roses climbing trellises, a fountain mossed over in places, and a bench that looked like it had seen 100 quiet afternoons. My mother used to bring me here, he said, standing beside a rusted sundial. Before everything got complicated. Zara didn't speak. She waited. She was a musician, a cellist, played with the City Philharmonic until her hands started shaking. Parkinson's. He sat on the bench, elbows on his knees. Most people thought she was fragile, but she was the strongest person I've ever known. What happened? She passed 2 years ago. I was in Tokyo for a summit. My father didn't tell me until it was over. Zara sat beside him. You didn't find out until after? He said he didn't want to disrupt negotiations. Quentin's voice was flat, but his jaw was tight. That was the last time we spoke. Zara looked out at the garden. Why bring me here? Because it's the only place I still feel like her son instead of a product she created. She turned to him. You think she created you? He nodded once. She wanted me to belong to a world she never quite fit into. So she made me fit. Private schools, etiquette lessons, business mentors at 13. I was fluent in investment talk before I ever kissed a girl. Zara let that settle between them before she asked, Do you ever wish she hadn't? He didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at her, he said, Every time I sit in a boardroom and feel nothing. She reached into her bag and pulled out a granola bar, handing it to him. He blinked. Is this symbolic? No. You skipped lunch and you look like you're about to start brooding dramatically. He laughed, breaking the wrapper. You're relentless. Only when necessary. They sat on the bench, eating granola bars in silence. The garden buzzed with bees and late summer warmth. Quentin leaned his head back against the bench and closed his eyes. I've never brought anyone here, he said. Then you're either incredibly trusting or incredibly reckless. I'm both when it comes to you. Zara stood, brushing crumbs from her jeans. Let's keep walking. I want to see what else you've got hidden behind secret gates and tragic cello stories. He rose, falling in step beside her. They wandered for an hour. Through winding paths, up stone steps, past university courtyards and old bookstores. She asked questions. He answered most. And when he didn't, she didn't push. Eventually, they ended up at a small deli. He bought her a sandwich. She made fun of his choice of sparkling water. He told her about the first company he ever started at 16, selling refurbished laptops to private schools. She told him about her first camera, a hand-me-down from a neighbor who owed her mom rent money. By the time the sun dipped low over the river, the air had cooled. She turned to him as they reached the subway steps. "So what now?" "I don't know. You're not used to not knowing, are you?" "I hate it." She smiled. "Good. That makes two of us." Before he could respond, a voice called his name. He turned. Across the street, a man in a gray suit stood beside a sleek black car, holding a phone. "Sir, I need you. There's been a development with the acquisition. They're threatening to pull out." Zara looked from the man to Quentin. He didn't move. The man tried again. "Sir, it's urgent." Quentin's gaze stayed locked on hers. "This is the part where I'm supposed to leave. Do you want to?" "No," she leaned in, voice low. "Then don't." He took a step toward her. "If I stay, things get messy. They already are. I don't want to mess this up." "Then don't." He stared at her for a beat longer, then turned to the man across the street. "Tell them I'll call in an hour." The man looked stunned. "Sir, an hour?" Quentin turned back to Zara, running a hand through his hair. "I just bought myself 60 minutes I can't afford." She grinned. "Then let's not waste them." The gallery was tucked behind a row of boutiques in Soho, unassuming from the outside, just a narrow window with a single spotlight illuminating a framed black and white photograph. But inside, it buzzed with quiet anticipation. The space had been transformed for the evening. Warm lights softened the exposed brick walls, string lights draped across the ceiling, and a soft instrumental playlist floated through the air. Zara stood near the back, heart pounding so hard it made her fingers tremble against the stem of her champagne glass. She hadn't expected this. Not any of it. She never thought she'd find herself at a private showing, her own, hosted in a space she hadn't even known existed a week ago. She'd only agreed to meet Quentin's friend, a gallery curator, because he'd insisted she had something worth showing. She assumed it would be a polite coffee, maybe a vague offer to consider her work in a group show next year. Instead, he'd booked the entire gallery for her. Tonight. And Quentin had done it all without telling her. "You look like you're about to bolt," came a voice behind her. She turned. Quentin stood by one of her framed prints, one of her favorites, a shot of an elderly man cradling his wife's hand on a park bench, the light catching the silver in her hair. He looked different tonight. Not just in the slate suit that fit like it had been stitched around his frame, but in the way his posture was looser, his expression open. At ease. "I might," she admitted. "I've never had people actually look at my work like this. Like it matters." "They're not just looking," he said. "They're connecting. That's different." She looked around. Guests moved slowly through the room, pausing at each piece. Her name was printed in gold on the exhibit cards, Zara Simmons, moments between. "You should have told me," she said, stepping toward him. "I would have worn something that didn't cost $28. "You're perfect," he said simply. She studied him for a moment. "You really don't care about appearances, do you?" "I care about authenticity. That's rarer than diamonds in my world." She set down her glass. "So, are you going to tell me why you're doing this?" He tilted his head. "Doing what?" "All of this. The gallery. The dinners. The showing up for photo shoots. You're not exactly known for pursuing anything that isn't a business acquisition." "You're not a business acquisition." "Exactly," she shot back. "So what are you doing?" He exhaled slowly. "I'm trying to build something that doesn't need a boardroom or a merger to matter. Something real." "And you think I'm real?" He stepped closer. "I think you're the first person in years who's ever made me feel like I'm not performing. And the idea of going back to my life before you, before that night at the diner, makes me feel hollow." Her voice was quiet. "So what happens when this stops being exciting for you?" Quentin's gaze didn't waver. "Then I'll fight to make it exciting again. Because I'm not chasing a thrill. I'm choosing you." She swallowed hard. A woman in a red blazer walked past, pausing to admire one of the prints. "This is breathtaking," she murmured before moving on. Zara's throat tightened. Quentin watched her. I know this scares you. I know you're used to holding everything together without anyone's help. But what if you didn't have to? She looked away. I'm not a project, Quentin. I know. You're a partner. Or you could be. She let the words settle. Slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. He unfolded it. It was a photo. Not one of hers. A candid shot she'd taken while he wasn't looking during that walk through the park. He was standing under a tree, sleeves rolled up, gazing toward the river. He looked unguarded. I had it printed, she said. I thought maybe it deserved a frame too. He looked at the photo, then back at her. No one's ever given me something like this. Because you don't let them see you. I let you. A silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. Then the lights dimmed slightly. The curator stepped forward, giving a short speech about the exhibit, ending with a toast to the artist. Applause rippled through the room. Zara's cheeks flushed. She felt Quentin's hand brush against hers. I want to do this right, he said under his breath. No pressure. No headlines. Just us. She turned to him. What does that look like? He glanced around the gallery. It starts with telling you that I'm not going anywhere. That I want to wake up with you in my arms, not just once, but always. That I want to build something with you, not a company. A life. Her breath caught. He reached into his jacket and pulled something from the inside pocket. A slim velvet box. Before she could speak, he opened it. Inside was a ring. Not enormous. Not flashy. Elegant. Thoughtful. A single round diamond set in a delicate band of platinum. I wasn't going to do this tonight, he said. I thought it might freak you out. It does, she whispered. But I'm doing it anyway. Because I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He took her hand. I love you, Zara Simmons. I love your fire. Your independence. Your vision. I love the way you see the world and how you make me see it differently. I know this is fast. I know it's insane. But I don't want to waste another day not building something with you. So I'm asking. He dropped to one knee. The room went still around them. Will you marry me? Zara stared at him. Her chest rose and fell with each shallow breath. And then, slowly, her lips curved. You're absolutely out of your mind. He grinned. Is that a yes? She nodded. It's a yes. The crowd erupted in applause. Champagne glasses clinked. Someone whistled. But all she saw was him, rising and pulling her into his arms. Her feet lifting off the ground as he kissed her like the world had stopped spinning. Later that night, they returned to her apartment. No staff, no chauffeurs, no cameras, just them. As she curled into his side, he whispered, You changed everything. She looked up at him. You did, she said. You just didn't know it yet. And in that quiet moment in a room filled with thrifted furniture and aging hardwood floors, a CEO found peace. And a photographer found the one place her heart could finally rest. The rain came softly that morning, tapping against the windows of the brownstone Quentin had bought for them in the West Village, a building with ivy crawling up the brick and creaky floorboards that Zara had insisted on keeping untouched. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of his shirts, her camera in hand. Light streamed through gauzy curtains, turning the space golden. She aimed the lens at him as he poured coffee, unaware. Don't move, she said. Quentin glanced up mid-pour. You're going to make me spill it again. You're a billionaire, she said. You can afford to clean it up. He gave her a sidelong look but stayed still. She clicked the shutter. I thought you said no cameras before caffeine, he added. I lied, she said, lowering the camera. Also, your hair does that ridiculous wave thing when it's damp. I had to capture it. He shook his head, then handed her a mug. You're relentless. You knew what you were marrying. There was a pause, warm and easy. Zara leaned against the counter, sipping. You know, he said, I had this idea that once we got married, things would calm down. Settle. And? I was wrong. Everything's louder. Brighter. More. She set down her mug. Do you regret it? He stepped closer, sliding his hands around her waist. Not even for a second. She kissed him, slow and certain. The kind of kiss that didn't ask questions or offer promises. It was just truth. Later that day, they stood in the heart of the city under a white canopy strung with soft lights. Their second wedding. The first had been private, quiet, just the two of them and a judge in a courthouse Zara had chosen on a whim. But today was different. This was the celebration they owed to the people who'd loved them through every messy chapter. Quentin's best friend from boarding school stood beside him, looking mildly stunned that the man who once claimed relationships were strategic distractions now wore a wedding band with visible pride. Zara's mother wiped tears from the corners of her eyes as she adjusted the hem of her daughter's dress, simple silk. No train, no veil, just elegance and ease. The guests gathered in a garden behind one of Quentin's buildings, a space he'd converted into a community art park after Zara insisted the city didn't need more glass towers, it needed beauty. The place was a riot of sunflowers and murals, every wall painted by local artists. Her photos hung from wire frames, swaying gently in the breeze. As the officiant spoke, Quentin didn't take his eyes off her. "Do you remember?" she whispered. "What you said to me the night you brought me cake?" He nodded. "I said I hadn't stopped thinking about you. And now, I still haven't." She laughed, eyes glistening. When they were pronounced husband and wife again, he didn't wait for permission. He kissed her like they were back in that rain-soaked street corner. Except this time, the whole world watched and cheered. That night, they danced in the garden under string lights and the faint hum of jazz. There was no grand orchestra, no five-course meal, just grilled street food, barefoot guests, and the sound of laughter echoing into the night. At one point, Zara tugged Quentin away from the crowd, leading him behind the mural wall. She pressed something into his hand. He opened it. A photograph. A single black and white image of a small, empty nursery lit by early morning light. He looked at her, brows knitting. "You're not serious." She nodded, biting her lip. "I found out yesterday. I wanted to tell you when it was just us." His hands trembled slightly as he looked at the photo again, her photo, taken that morning. A crib in silhouette. A soft blanket. "Hope. I didn't think I could feel more than I already did," he said, voice thick. "But this." He looked up at her. "You just gave me something I didn't even know I wanted." She stepped into him, pressing a hand to his chest. "We can figure it out. Together." He kissed her forehead. "We will. I promise you." Months passed. The city turned gold, then gray, then pale again. The brownstone filled with framed memories, half-finished photo series, and late-night arguments about baby names. Quentin started coming home earlier. Zara started sleeping more. Their life wasn't perfect, but it pulsed with meaning. One quiet Sunday, Zara stood in their nursery, the morning light casting long lines across the floor. Quentin came in without knocking, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "She kicked again," Zara murmured, placing his hand on her belly. He waited. And then there it was, a soft thump, like a heartbeat against his palm. Quentin rested his forehead against her shoulder. "I didn't know I could love someone I haven't even met yet. You're going to be the kind of dad who reads business articles out loud to a toddler, aren't you?" "Absolutely. And I'll teach her about mergers before the alphabet." She turned in his arms. "Her?" He grinned. "It's a guess. But she'll have your eyes. That much I'm sure of." They stood in silence, the moment stretching gently around them. Outside, the city moved on, horns blaring, people rushing, but inside that room, time slowed. And everything for once was enough. Their story hadn't started with perfection. It had started with rain and a cracked diner table. But now it was a life, a real one. And they were exactly where they were meant to be. Together. Always.